So we're going to continue topic 6.10 by looking at integration using completing the square. So there's a little box up here. It isn't quite the way that we taught completing the square, but it talks about completing the square. Remember what happens when we have completing the square is that we have some kind of a binomial. It really stems from like having x minus 2, let's not do that. So x minus 3 squared and x squared plus, not plus, minus 6x plus 9. So this perfect square trinomial factors into this. So basically what's happening is if I can find, I'll have maybe these first two parts and I need to figure out what goes in the blank to complete the square in order to get it to factor into something like this. So typically when we completed the square, we would ask ourselves, we would divide the middle by 2, and then we would square it to get the end. Okay, and when I divided the middle by 2, I kind of cheated by writing the answer here. Okay, all right, because if I did my good old magic x, two numbers that multiply to 9 and add to -6, I would get -3 and 3. So it does work. All right, so let's look at one that requires us to actually complete the square. So there really isn't much I can do. It looks like it could be a u sub, but there's no x and I cannot input an x. I can put a number in there, but I cannot add an x into an integral. So I'm going to split this up a little bit. So I know that I have a 1 on the top. I know I've got a dx at the back. I'm going to look at it as like x squared minus 4x plus some kind of blank plus 7. And then remember, I really can't, if I add something here, I also have to subtract that number. That way it's like adding 0. It's like adding nothing to the function, okay? At the same time I'm doing that, I'm going to set up what my integral is going to look like once I factor this piece here, okay? So that piece there is going to factor into something squared. We already know it. And it's going to be x something squared. And then whatever this thing plus whatever my new blank is there. Okay. And it's going to be whatever I get when I add these two numbers here together. So that's where that comes from. All right, so then I'm going to start asking myself, I'm going to do my completing the square process. I'm going to divide by 2. So -4 divided by 2 is -2. Okay. Maybe I should write that. Let's see, if I divide by 2, I get -2. Hopefully that color codes it a little bit for you and where it's coming from. And that's just my rules for completing the square. Now I'm going to take that number that I divided by 2, and my hint is right there. I'm going to square it. So I'm going to square that number, and I get 4. And I put that in both the blanks because I have to add 4 and subtract 4, so it's like I'm adding 0. Now I'm going to combine these numbers together here, and I get 7 minus 4, which is 3. Okay, now I'm ready to do the calculus. That was just the algebra piece. So all I have to do here now is hopefully I recognize that this is one of my inverse trig functions. It's actually the arctangent. So u squared and a squared. So my u, let's see if I can find a spot to write it. So u is equal to x minus 2, and a is equal to the square root of 3. There's nothing fancy. There's no u substitutions because there's no coefficients in front of my x. So I'm just a really straightforward arctangent problem. So remember, arctangent's formula says 1 over a in the front, so square root of 3. Arctangent of u, which is the x minus 2, over the a, which is the square root of 3, plus c. All right, let's try one. This one's a little bit more complicated because I have a negative leading coefficient. So that's going to do some craziness to the inside, okay? So I'm going to start by rewriting it and taking that negative coefficient out. Okay, so I've got 1 over the square root of negative, and I'm going to put a parentheses, x squared, I'm reversing the order, minus 3x And then I'm going to kind of keep my parentheses. I'm going to start setting up for my completing the square piece. So I know I'm going to have to put something in there, and I'm going to have to do two things with it. I'm going to have to add it and do something else with it. So I've got that and a blank. Okay, so I've got a blank and a blank. And whatever I put in those blanks, I'm going to have to, is going to have to be the same number but opposite signs. Okay, but the opposite signs are going to be kind of weird in this case. So dx. And then at the same time, I'm going to set up for my cheating, for what I call cheating factoring. So I've really got this as x something squared, and then this blank goes over there, okay? And then this is going to be some other kind of blank. I think I did it in pink before, okay? So I'm going to do completing the square. So completing the square says I need to divide by 2. So I'm dividing this by 2, which nicely gets us -3/2. Wasn't that lovely? All right, then I'm going to take that -3/2 and I'm going to square it. So -3/2 squared would be 9/4. Now, technically it's plus 9/4, but there's a catch. Really what I did here, because I'm distributing a negative, is really what I put in there was a -9/4 because of that negative that's here. So that means in my blank there, since I put in a -9/4, I'm going to add a positive 9/4. But it looks weird because it looks like I'm doing plus and plus, but that minus sign is affecting the outcome right now. So I'm going to do plus 9/4 there. And believe it or not, we actually have just a good old straightforward arc sign going on, because arc sign says, hey, I just reversed these guys here because my A is usually up front. So they were kind of sneaky with that negative coefficient. X minus 3/2 dx, and I had lost my dx there. All right, so this would be the a squared. This, I lost the squared on it, is the u squared. So let's see, the u is equal to, let's see, I have to take the square root of that. So it'd be the square root. What happened? You know, the square, it's not, it's the squared. I've lost the squared on me in my brain. I lost that squared right there. So x minus 3/2, and then the a is going to be the square root of 9/4, which is 3/2. All right, so we're going to do a very straightforward arc sign. In arc sign, there's nothing fancy out front. It's just simply arc sign. And then the u is the x minus 3/2 over the a, which is 3/2 plus c. You can leave it like that. You could also flip the reciprocal on this if you wanted to. So arc sign of 2/3 times x minus 3/2 plus c. So if I distributed that in, it would be 2/3 x minus 1 plus c. There's probably other ways to rearrange the algebra as well.